The year was 1428, and the French city of Orléans stood at the precipice of despair. For months, the English had tightened their grip around the Loire Valley, seeking to strangle the heart of France itself. This was not a skirmish, nor a minor clash of arms. It was a siege that would come to define the struggle between two nations, a test of endurance, leadership, and sheer human will. Orléans, a jewel of the Loire, had become a symbol not just of a city under threat, but of the fragile hope of a nation battered by years of conflict. As winter approached, with frost biting the edges of the Loire and snow threatening to blanket the cobbled streets, the inhabitants of Orléans faced a relentless foe who sought not just conquest, but annihilation. The English forces, seasoned, well armed, and ruthless, were determined to break the French defenses and pave the way for their ultimate claim to the French crown. Yet, in the midst of despair, a spark would ignite an unlikely figure who would rise from obscurity and change the course of history forever. The siege itself was a study in military strategy, patience, and psychological warfare. The English commander, the Earl of Salisbury, understood the importance of cutting off Orléans from the surrounding countryside, severing supplies, and slowly starving the city into submission. Each attempt to storm the walls was repelled by the defenders, whose courage was matched only by their desperation. They fortified barricades, repaired breaches in the walls, and manned every tower and parapet with resolute determination. Night after night, the English launched attacks attempting to exploit weaknesses in the fortifications, while the citizens of Orléans, armed with whatever they could find, pikes, boiling oil, stones, fought back with the ferocity of those who knew their homes and families were at stake. Chroniclers of the time, including contemporary accounts from Jean Chartier and the records of the Burgundian chroniclers, emphasized the psychological tension. The English expected a quick victory. Yet each failed assault slowly eroded their morale, even as the defenders were pushed to the brink of exhaustion. Into this maelstrom of siege and suffering stepped Joan of Arc, a figure who, at the time, seemed almost otherworldly. A peasant girl from Dommermay, claiming visions from saints, she arrived in Orléans in April 1429, bringing not only her faith, but a clarity of purpose that would galvanize a city on the verge of collapse. Her presence was immediately felt, both physically and spiritually. She inspected the fortifications, encouraged the soldiers, and reassured the citizens that the city would not fall. Her leadership style was unlike that of the seasoned generals. She led from the front, often at the forefront of attacks, and inspired a sense of invincibility that no weapon could easily overcome. Historians such as Kelly de Vries in Joan of Arc, a military leader, note that her role went beyond mere inspiration. She was instrumental in strategic decisions, directing assaults on key positions like the Tourelles and coordinating the morale of both soldiers and civilians alike. The arrival of Joan transformed the siege from a slow, grinding stalemate into a series of bold offensives that would ultimately break the English stranglehold. The strategic points of Orléans, particularly the heavily fortified Tourelles on the eastern bank of the Loire, became the focal points of the renewed French attacks. Under Joan's guidance, these fortifications were assaulted with a coordinated combination of artillery, archers, and infantry, while she personally led charges that inspired soldiers to push beyond the limits of human endurance. Contemporary accounts detail her presence on the battlefield, as electric soldiers reportedly said that seeing her standard raised and hearing her commands made them feel as if divine intervention had joined the ranks. Her unwavering confidence and insistence on aggressive tactics contrasted sharply with the cautious approaches of the previous commanders, and this change in momentum became the key factor in lifting the siege. The Siege of Orléans was not merely a military event. It was a turning point in the broader conflict of the Hundred Years' War. The English, who had dominated northern France for decades, were forced to acknowledge that French resistance, previously dismissed as disorganized and ineffective, had been revitalized. The psychological impact of Joan's leadership and the victory at Orléans reverberated across the French territories. It marked the first major success in a series of campaigns that would eventually see the French reclaim vast swaths of territory and undermine the legitimacy of English claims to the French throne. Scholars such as Juliet Barker in Conquest, The English Kingdom of France in the Hundred Years' War, argue that the lifting of Orléans was as much a cultural and symbolic victory as a tactical one, demonstrating that morale, leadership, and belief in a cause could turn the tide of a conflict as effectively as armies and fortifications. The siege also highlighted the evolution of military tactics in the early 15th century. The English relied heavily on fortified positions, longbowmen, and calculated attrition warfare, while the French demonstrated flexibility, rapid mobilization, and a willingness to exploit enemy weaknesses through direct assaults and audacious maneuvers. The clash at Orléans illustrated the limitations of purely defensive strategies against a motivated and unified opponent. It also underscored the importance of leadership in warfare. Joan's ability to inspire, coordinate, and make decisive choices at critical moments exemplified the impact that individual figures could have on the broader outcomes of conflicts that involved thousands of combatants. As the siege drew to a close, the fall of key English fortifications along the Loire forced a hasty withdrawal of the besieging forces. The lifting of the siege on May 8, 1429, was met with jubilation by the citizens of Orléans and by the French army at large. Streets filled with celebration, yet the victory was tempered by the recognition of the immense cost, lives lost, buildings destroyed, and the grim reminder that the war was far from over. Yet, the successful defense of Orléans became a rallying point, not just for the French military, but for the entire nation. It proved that resilience, faith, and inspired leadership could achieve what many considered impossible. In retrospect, the Siege of Orléans was more than a mere episode of warfare. It was the birth of a legend. Joan of Arc's emergence from obscurity to command attention and respect on the battlefield reshaped both the French war effort and the narrative of heroism in medieval Europe. Her role at Orléans demonstrated the profound intersection of personal conviction and national struggle, showing that even in the darkest hours of conflict, decisive action and moral courage could change the course of history. Military historians continue to study the siege, analyzing troop movements, fortification strategies, and leadership decisions, yet the enduring fascination remains with the human dimension, the fear, hope, and inspiration that transformed a beleaguered city into a beacon of resistance. The legacy of the Siege of Orléans endures not only in historical texts, but in the cultural memory of France and the world. It is a story of perseverance against overwhelming odds, of a nation refusing to succumb to conquest, and of the extraordinary impact a single individual can have when courage meets opportunity. The siege embodies the complexities of medieval warfare, the evolution of military tactics, and the timeless truths about human resilience and leadership. For anyone who studies history, Orléans serves as a reminder that victory is often determined not just by numbers or equipment, but by the spirit, determination, and vision of those who dare to act when all seems lost. By analyzing the siege in the context of both military strategy and human narrative, one gains insight into why Orléans is remembered not merely as a city under attack, but as a crucible in which the fate of France, and indeed the course of European history, was forged. It is a testament to the enduring power of leadership, the critical role of morale in warfare, and the capacity of ordinary individuals to shape extraordinary outcomes. From the cold banks of the Loire to the pages of history, the Siege of Orléans stands as a defining moment of courage, faith, and tactical brilliance, ensuring that its story will resonate for generations to come.